So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. This is the South Bay Council of Governments Board of Directors meeting of Thursday, August 27th, 2020, conducted via Zoom. And we have verified the quorum.
We have to have a roll call vote.
All right.
David's going to call the roll by city. So David, can you do that?
Sure. Carson.
Present.
El Segundo, I don't see anybody. Gardena.
Present.
Hawthorne.
Here.
Hermosa Beach.
Here.
Inglewood.
Here.
Lawndale.
Here.
Lamita. Nobody. City of LA.
Here.
Manhattan Beach.
Here.
PV Estates.
Here.
RPV. Here. Redondo Beach. Nobody. Rolling Hills.
Here.
Rolling Hills Estates.
Here.
Torrance. No Torrance. LA County 2nd District. LA County 4th District. And then Redondo Beach, I saw you come in. Okay, that's everybody. So yes, we have a quorum.
Thank you. May we confirm the posting of the agenda by the city clerk?
Yes, it has been posted.
Are there announcements of changes to the calendar?
Yes, I do have that. First of all, the first item on South Bay reports is I want to make sure it's very clear that is an action item. And then you were also sent 3 attachments today. One is the new legislative matrix, which is what's happening in Sacramento that I could figure out as of this morning. A couple of bills have died, but most of our matrix is still going. Yesterday, our chair signed a letter, which we sent to all of our legislators on SB 1120 again, which was 10 reasons to oppose. And so we sent that up to Sacramento. And then also we sent you out a new newsletter, which will be posted on our website and sent to our mailing list. I wanted to mention also that we are, instead of taking roll call votes, if we have, our attorney has said, if we have a vote that looks like everybody's going to vote yes, or it's non-controversial, we can do a reverse roll call where David will ask if there is any member that wants to vote no or abstain, and then everybody else will be recorded as a yes, and that should make it faster, and that is okay under the Brown Act. Okay?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, that's it. Those are my comments.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask for the consent calendar at this time.
I'm sorry, we have comments from the public.
Comments? Are there public comments?
I don't think so, but you know, I wanted to mention something, and I don't even know if he remembered. And I don't know if Joe, you can help me with this, but Mayor Butts called me and said that he was going to maybe participate in the beginning of the meeting because he forgot to say something at the board meeting, at our special board meeting. I guess I could bring it up later, but what he was going to say was that city council members, he gave a good analysis of what city council members should do. And he said city council members should ask, and now I'm losing my word, for when investigations are done, there's a year to do the investigation. And if the investigation isn't done in a year, then you can't do a reprimand. Joe, tell me if I'm right. And so he said that several departments will wait that year, and then they can't do the reprimand. They can just do the report. So it's really important to ask your department how many investigations they've done and what the length of those are, so that they don't hold them to a year.
I believe that's Jackie. No, I think you're in the ballpark. I believe that's all through the state law on when that time expires, and I believe it is that 1 year mark.
So he wanted to stress how important that was to make sure you know that.
So is that the case with the sheriff also?
If it's state law, it would be the sheriff as well.
Is that what he said? State law?
Yeah, Councilman Vizcaino just said it was state law, so I'm assuming I think it's state law. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, I just remembered, he said he would try to call in and he didn't call in, so.
Oh, so hopefully we can get more clarification from him at a later time so that we can post it so that all the members can have the information.
Okay,
So would you please do that when you get a chance to contact him and get him to send it to us directly or send it to you so you can send it to us?
Yeah.
That's important.
okay.
All right, so the consent calendar is next, and are there items that anyone would like to discuss? And I would like to discuss item E.
And I would like to briefly discuss items B, C, and D just to record information in a call I had with Jackie prior to the meeting.
Okay, so then that leaves us with A and F. So I will entertain a motion to approve consent.
A and F, Horvath.
Pardon me?
Motion to approve A and F, Horvath.
Second, Hicks.
Thank you. Can we go ahead with reverse roll call?
Sure. Are there any no votes for approving items A and F? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Okay,
So B, you wanted to talk about B? Item B?
Yes, and regarding the McGowan contract, I just was inquiring of Jackie because it appears that there's a quid pro quo. They're providing information for the website and they're paying us, meaning the COG, this money. And Jackie assured me that no more than the $5,500 is going to be done in terms of services, even though the contract doesn't specify that the services are limited to that amount. And the same would apply with the sanitation district in item C. But I think that in the future, I recommended that we put a clause like that in the contract just to make sure that if for some reason a vendor says, hey, you still have additional duties that you contracted to do, and even if it goes above the amount that we're paying you in a grant for this, that we think you ought to comply with it. So I think it should be clear in the contract. Another thing with the McGowan Consulting, I just was inquiring whether or not there is some type of credit being given or it's being clear that McGowan is providing the information or that they are the designer of devices that are discussed in the website, because if that's the case, we would not want to, as a public agency, appear to be endorsing them vis-a-vis other consultants or vendors of products that are being touted in the website. So there should be some kind of advisement saying that we're not endorsing anyone, or that if it's not coming from the COG, it should be attributed to the watershed management group that is providing the information and actually contracts with McGowan, is what I was told by Jackie. So I just wanted to put that out there for the future. Obviously can't change this contract, but we need to be cautioned about that so we're not looking like we're endorsing a particular vendor.
we can bring this back to the steering committee, but I did talk with Kim a little about this. All of our pages are from our partners, and this is one of those pages that's from our partners, and we don't, on the transportation page, we don't attribute everything to that partner. So Kim, I don't know if you want to respond to this, but
yeah, I would just say a couple things. So one is we do not, it's a pass-through from McGowan. They're actually under contract with the Beach Cities Watershed Management Group and the Peninsula Watershed Management Group representatives, those two groups. And then they hire us to, they cover part of the cost of that web page, because we actually have other kinds of things on that web page, including like rain barrel and things like that that come under our water contracts. Their name, McGowan, is not actually on the page at all. And all of the links are links to public agencies. So like WaterSmart, California WaterSmart and things like that. So that we don't have an appearance that somehow we have a special relationship with any particular vendor. if there is ever any devices or anything like that, that would be for any of our, information that's on our website, they would always come from, like, for example, gas company has certified vendors, and then we just link to them. We don't actually post it ourselves. We link to other web pages by public agencies.
Okay, that's good to know. Just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to get in any trouble with that. And then the last item, in terms of South Bay Chamber of Commerce memberships, Jackie clarified in our conversation that that money is coming from grants and not from COG dues, and that was important for me to know. So, but maybe something can be designated in staff reports just to say where the money's coming from when there's two separate funding sources, grants and dues. All right, thank you. That's all.
All right, so we've clarified B and D. What about C? Was that one you also pulled, B?
Yeah, that was the one that I just mentioned, that in the future for contracts, it should probably be clear, as in, I mentioned in the case of item B, that the services provided by the COG are limited to the funding that is being provided pursuant to the contract. So there's no argument later that the COG owes more services for which the funding has been exhausted, so that we would be eating the extra services in terms of having to provide what we contracted to do. So that, to make it clear that we're not going to provide extra services above and beyond the grant source or the monies being provided by the vendor.
All right, thank you. So if there are no further comments on B, C, and D, I'll entertain a motion to approve those three.
Okay, with that
So moved,
understanding,
Horvath.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, B, and is there a second?
Second, Horvath.
Okay, and Horvath makes a second. All right, so can we have a reverse roll call?
Yes. Anybody opposed to approving items B, C, and D of the consent calendar? See none.
Reverse
Any-
roll calls, really embracing and respecting the reverse roll calls.
Any abstentions?
That's a good one.
Nope. Okay. Items B, C, and D are approved.
Okay, so the last one left is E, and that was the one that I pulled. And the reason I pulled it is because I wanted to find out about the Restaurant Act proposal. So that proposal is on pages 27 and 28, and I'm pulling it because it sounds really good. But what are we asked to do here? There doesn't seem to be a bill that we can support, or is there a bill that we can support?
This is the information that he sent me. I'm not aware of a bill. We can, I can, and I don't know if you would want to support it because, I don't know if it's in our bailiwick, but we can take it to the steering committee and we can investigate it further.
I think we should do that, but I don't want to drop it because it looks like it's something that would be helpful to the restaurants, and we certainly want to see the revival of our restaurants. So I would like to consider supporting it, but as I said, I didn't see any mechanism by which we could support it, but I'd like to investigate that further.
Yeah, he said he would send us information. This is the information he sent. So I will look into it further.
Okay, so then we'll just not consider E then, is that right?
Well, E is a receive and file. It's just for your information.
Okay, all right. So then we don't, that's not necessary to approve, you're saying?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Then that takes care of the consent calendar, and we move on to the presentations. Mr. Larry Cosmont, Chairman and CEO of Cosmont Companies. Mr. Larry Cosmont is Chairman and CEO, and he founded this Cosmont Companies in 1986. Cosmont Companies is an industry leader in public-private real estate transactions and economic development. In 1990, Mr. Cosmont founded Cosmont Realty, a real estate brokerage firm. In 2015, he launched Cosmont Transaction Services, which sources financing for public-private projects, P3 initiatives, and infrastructure funding. Mr. Cosmont's 40-year career encompasses public-private financial structuring, negotiation, development, and management of real estate and public finance transactions exceeding $12 billion. He has assisted hundreds of local government agencies in public finance and real estate matters, ranging from large-scale economic development programs to site-specific real estate strategies and projects. He has guided over 1,000 private sector projects in obtaining public approvals, structuring deal terms, and securing public-private financing. Welcome to the South Bay COG, Mr. Cosmont.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, all of you. Can you hear me? Am I okay? Clear?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. And can you see my screen? Does that work well?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I have a fairly lengthy presentation. I'll move through it very quickly. You're welcome to have this presentation. It was done by Cosmont's team over the last 6 months since COVID began. It is the culmination of a lot of data gathering. We are all seeing so much data as it relates to COVID and economics and unemployment and a whole series of issues, store closures and business impairment. What I wanted to do as part of our practice, you know that we work on economic development, real estate, and public finance. We have 3 companies that does that. We service, dozens of public agencies throughout California. Many of you are our clients, and we're privileged to work with you. The importance of this presentation is really to help you as city leaders understand where we are in the COVID economy and how can you marshal your resources, your staffs, and the private sector in a collective effort to rekindle, restart, revitalize, and rejuvenate when we've been hit so hard in so many ways, and some of the effects still not entirely understood for sure. But this presentation gives you a dashboard that we have curated from so much data that we've looked at for each product type: hotel, commercial, retail, residential. So it starts to help you distill and understand where, at least at Cosmont, we see these trends and how they can affect your decisions on land use planning, on economic development, on public-private transactions, and just shoring up your local economy. So we hope you find it useful, hopefully enjoyable. It is pretty pithy. It's got a lot of data. Again, I'll share it. I'm glad to chat with any of you offline. I want to give shout out to my council member, Hildy Stern. I'm giving this presentation from 11th and John in Manhattan Beach. So hello, Hildy. Headlines. We are working with lots of headlines. The ones that are material to us, though, are those that really indicate that we're having a significant shift in the economy. Malls will never be the same. You're going to find that. I know Christian Horvath is on the line. Not all these comments are directed to the Galleria, but some of them apply to the Galleria. Just malls will never be the same. They're going to be different. We'll talk about that. We're going to continue to see store closing, shrinkage in retail square footage. The country is already over-retailed anyway. We have an economy that is blended and moved toward an industrial delivery format for food, for goods, and so on. And it's just, even though, and when we get past COVID, which we will, we're going to face a much different economy. And so what we've tried to do in this presentation is break it down to the challenge, which you already know a lot about. I'll go through that quickly. How the challenge ends up in a land use revolution, which is where private investment is shifting and how that affects our zoning, our economic development decisions in the public sector. Some new tools that we have to use in this COVID economy, and a look to the future. So resiliency and recovery is really the mantra, if you will, of working in a COVID economy. I mean, this has been a global crisis. It is a global crisis. We in the public sector have moved from the left, public health and social need first, then dealing with relief of economic pressures for all of us, like in Manhattan Beach and other cities that have opened up public space to private use, Those are immediate relief models that help. It's just on the right, the long-term recovery, the declining tax revenues, the uncertainty of long-term vitality in so many of our businesses is really where we need to focus. So this presentation really looks to that recovery green line on the right, because we know that we're already dealing with response and relief. The key is, how do we turn the corner on economic development? Because today we're working on things like cash flow control, flexible zoning, working with local stakeholders, grabbing federal and state money wherever we can. Tomorrow, which is really today, it's about reprioritizing capital projects, embracing technology, figuring out how we can use low interest rates that are historically low to add a dimension of value accretion to our local government coffers. Many cities now looking to refund pension obligations because you've got 2 to 3% interest rate changes. I'll talk about Carson in a little while. We just finished a $104 million POB for Carson. We're working on that with a number of other cities. Land use revolution is inescapable. You will see exactly what I mean by that when I show you how these trends from COVID are impacting every possible product that we deal with on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, or a Tuesday or Wednesday day in a planning commission meeting and a city council meeting. Hotel, long way back. 2023 is about the soonest we're going to see the hotel market fully recover. They're reshuffling. They're going to be converting to other uses in many cases. We're already seeing hotel being used as office, hotel moving to residential. Retail, this is really, COVID has accelerated the incursion of online sales, and malls are just not retail space anymore. They can't be. There's not enough retail to fill these malls. It's about blended uses, much different than mixed use. Mixed use connotes stacking a use above retail, residential above retail. Blended use says take a property and put a whole significant mix of different uses to drive essential services, drive experience, commingle those uses, and use outdoors and anchor. Office will be changed forever. The balance of office is not that it's going to go away. It's just that work from home for so many companies will shift how much office space and where that office space is. And within the office itself, we call it the 6-foot office. This whole open approach to office space goes away in the COVID economy, and co-working is significantly challenged. We'll talk about all these. It's just a summary. Demand is strong on residential. What I call a suburban evolution, at this point, to many generations, being in a suburban location is safer, more appealing than being in an intense urban location. So that's a shift. Don't know if that's permanent, but it's certainly now. We are seeing it. And of course, the leader of the pack, because of a digital economy, warehouse and logistics, last mile delivery, really reshuffle. The way to take the scorecard and believe in it is just see what the stock market has done. This is a plot, this is a graph that we put together that takes lots of data inputs and shows you where the market has devalued these real estate product types. Hotel, over 50% devaluation. Retail, nearly 40%. Office, almost 25%. You can see that residential, it's a mix. Some multifamily, 23% and coming back. Single family, much stronger. Look on the right, industrial, infrastructure, data centers, all winners. So it just gives you a sense of how to understand the metrics so that when you read these things in the paper, you can really determine what's truly happening. And what does it mean to us? You know, private sector loss equals public sector pain. And this is where the land use revolution starts, because we have to compensate for getting hit hard in sales tax and hotel taxes. Property tax has been fairly strong, actually. The impacts have been mild and moderate. This tells you the story. We plotted every city in California is on this. There are duplicate plot points because cities end up in the same spot, but the blue are cities that have significant risk from hotel tax exposure. So for example, a top left may be a place like Half Moon Bay, which has as its largest use a Ritz-Carlton hotel and really not much else. The cities in red have risk from sales and hotel. That's many of you here. You've been hit hard for both sectors, and some harder in sales tax. That might be a place like Cerritos, for example, that has a lot of retail, perhaps less hotel. I did this for you. I mean, again, you can take a picture of it. I can give this to you. It basically shows you where you are in terms of collection of sales tax and TOT as your overall revenue play. And that's why you can see on the left and in the middle and right, in some cases, sales tax and TOT is a significant revenue source for many of you. And so being hit hard really makes a difference. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm just sort of explaining how the metrics of the private market are reflected by the metrics of the tax accretion market. And we've rated all of these product types, and the rating, the 5-star, 4-star, 3-star ratings that you see all relate to when they come back. So if you think about it, that chart that I showed you on Wall Street, the data centers, industrial, and certainly food, they're all been pretty strong, single family that I pointed out. So they're 4- and 5-star uses. Office is very sideways. We're only beginning to understand where the office market is. And others like business travel, international tourism, and malls, really 1-star, meaning they've got a longer recovery time. So what I'm going to do is quickly go through some key dashboards. And after each dashboard, I have some comments that will basically seek to just illustrate some of the results that we're seeing. And so in hotel valuation models are basically showing that between 2 and 3 years is when hotels come back. So what does that mean? That means you have sufficient occupancy to have new hotels developed or existing hotels refurbished and so on. The impact for us is, of course, TOT and some sales tax. The questions for us on the right is, can you jumpstart tourism? Can you facilitate extended stay hotels? Because up on top, you'll see that the travel that is strongest is business travel. The travel that also is fairly strong is local leisure travel. If you have a destination hotel that's local, people can drive to it, there's a greater possibility of getting some kind of occupancy. But conferences and events, international tourism, tougher spot. This just what really happens with hospitality. By the way, all of these product types that we're showing you, their comeback really relies on consumer confidence, right? Because we are in the United States essentially a consumer-driven economy. About 65% of the GNP is driven from consumer activity. So what's really happening here is that while local leisure travel is starting to rebound, it's slow. It's really not coming quickly. And what happens in hotel is that until hotels can convince through what I call cleanliness theater that it's safe, people won't come back. It'll just be a slow recovery. So what's trending is tech to the rescue, contactless keys, robotic room service. You're seeing some shift of uses. You're seeing some shift to residential. And again, a longer term recovery for hotel. Retail is so interesting because retail is just flat out on the operating table. And the reason is look, we started out pretty sick if you think about it. On the left, you'll see that we have more shopping center square footage per person than any other country. Actually, almost a little bit less than the next two. And everyone else much less, 23.5 square feet per person. That just translates into overabundant retail coverage. Just think about it though, after Prop 13, all cities in California did. I was a city manager back then. At the age of 26, I was running a city in Southeast Los Angeles. All we did was target retail. We've been targeting retail for 30 years because of the sales tax. So what's happened? A decade of change occurred in a month. And this is why it's a 2-star, because e-commerce, certainly food delivery, have really impacted the way we get our services and our goods. And the truth of it is that, you know, the store as a showroom will be just that, but unless it's a delivery point and tied to a delivery point in this digital economy, it just doesn't work as well. The metric that we're using for our client on the bottom right is trips versus square footage. It's really not so much about the square footage, because the square footage of retail will be dramatically reduced in all these centers. You're going to see that for a long, long time. The question is, can you increase the trips to the retail that's there? And the only way you can get that done is by blending uses, putting in uses that generate trips in and of themselves. That could be entertainment, which may be outdoor for a while. That could be educational. That could be, of course, food. But whatever that is, it's the trip that generates the sale. Otherwise, it gets done on your PDA or on your computer. So what's happening? We're seeing currently a lot of flexibility and collaboration for flexible reopening, but we see retail growing very unevenly. You know, food strong, some electronics strong, but mostly online. Excuse me. And we're also seeing the cities and landlords are really trying to collaborate, but the middle picture really tells the story. We are going to see, and we're already starting to see it with Simon companies buying retailers, with Simon getting into a deal with Amazon to put them into new old JCPenney's. This is that there can't be a easier, more dramatic reflection of a digital processed economy when you shift out a large-scale national retailer and move to a digital market like Amazon in that same building. So what's trending? Store closures, bankruptcies, moving toward blended use. The faster any of you can move to help your local owners of large regional centers or large centers on boulevards to move that to a mixed use or a blended, what I call a blended use component, whether that means adding residential or other uses. It's not necessarily residential, but I'll talk about that in a while. It's just, that's the right move, because praying for retail is like waiting for Godot. It's not gonna happen.
Larry, do you know how Amazon's using JCPenney? Is it for pickup, delivery, or both?
Yeah, you know, so Amazon's an interesting story. They started out, 10 years ago from the last, let's say 6 years, they've been on a march to cover 80% of the population centers of the United States within an hour trip of a distribution center. So they've been populating like in San Bernardino or Riverside. About 3 years ago, they made the shift and said, now we need to go to last mile delivery. This is a last mile delivery facility. And basically what it does is it just drops the distribution from that larger center in the fringe of a large urban center to a populated area like the South Bay for immediate 2-hour delivery. This building is all about, I can get it to you in 60 minutes or 2 hours. That's what this is about.
Wow.
But by the way, they are so far down the road on this footprint that game is already over. This is the last piece of a march to delivery that Amazon has been on for 10 years, just there. So, reindustrial, basically that's what we call reindustrial, retail industrial, where you're going to see excess space in retail centers move to some form of logistics delivery format. By the way, by doing that, you probably help the retailers that are left because you get them to be an active showroom. Office configuration, let's talk about that. This one is really a puzzler because at some level, there may be less space needed. There's not a tenant out there that isn't reconsidering their lease that's coming up in the next couple of years. And they're thinking, what? Really, do I have to force people to commute from the Inland Empire to LA or Orange County, or can I work from home? Less space needed. Then you have just the logistics of office, the health and cleanliness theater that we're talking about. So if you have less people, you may still need more space. That's why this is rated a 3, because it's going in a couple of different directions. Clearly, co-working has to figure out a different solution. I just saw that a number of companies like Regis are buying buildings and converting to co-working, but it's all office co-working. It's not that open space that you see all these, pictures of attractive millennials running around with coffee in their hand and a barista. It's changing, right? It is just changing. That model has to change. So the question for communities is, how can we reconfigure our spaces so that it's attractive to office to either reopen or build? How do we work through our residential design so that work from home and new units that are developed is more expansive? And we are going to have turn and turnover. We're going to lose some good tenants in this. And so we have to figure out what that means to us. Putting destination locations next to amenities is preferred. I think office is not going away. It's the attractiveness and the health and safety of office that will shift. And we're going to see a lot of different kinds of configurations. And this is sort of one of my favorite slides. I love the one on the bottom right. This, I think, a module that you can buy for something like $7,000. I forget the price on this, but it's just a standalone office you can put in your backyard. It won't look as nice as Christian's office, by the way. I saw that background, by the way, Christian. So, but the truth of it is that that is kind of the mentality of this marketplace. If you look at the top middle, you can see that 6-foot office with a lot of space. That's pretty inefficient space compared to the kinds of offices we've been seeing developed recently where we're packing them in. So lower occupancy, design changes. Here's another shift. Suburban. It is not only a function of working at home, but if you're going to go to work in a closer place that has less density and that integrates with the outdoors. That's where you're going to find office and these reimagined malls coming together. Residential has been strong. Now, the blue line is sort of Los Angeles 4 or 5-star. The upper end apartments have taken a hit, and I think it is short-lived. And the reason is you've had so many people lose jobs. So more expensive rental units have either been flat or receded a bit, but to come back in pretty short order because residential overall is just in demand. The B and C product, which is green and red, really remains quite strong. The shifting trends are, open space and design, consumers preferring mid or low density, and then there's a new opportunity, which is to add multifamily on struggling retail sites. Here's the discussion I want to have with you. We always say that the model for residential doesn't really help cities because it's not accretive to our bottom line. We don't get sales tax, and it causes and generates services. Yeah, true. I mean, I run these models for you. I fully understand. I also think the models we use, InPlan and others, are really outdated. I mean, right now, I have spent lots of money from a converted bedroom in Manhattan Beach where I'm running 3 businesses. There's a lot of people that are spending money and contributing to the economy without leaving the house. Our models really don't reflect what the contribution of residential is in the digital economy. So I just want to put that out there because I'm not advocating density here. I'm advocating a re-look at the blend of uses. Here's the other notion. Because retail is receding and because there's so much vacancy, guess what the property values of retail are? They're dropping, whereas residential is in demand. So when you blend residential space with retail space, you have upped the land value for the owner of that property. You should be able to exchange that increase in value, that gift of residential, which by the way works for you in this economy. You ought to be able to exchange that for a whole series of amenities because you're creating capitalization value by delivering retail to that kind of a use.
We're going to ask a question before
Yeah,
you.
sure. Yeah.
So with regards to the residential, right?
Yes.
Multifamily, like, are you seeing that multifamily is taking more of a hit as a kind of as a byproduct of COVID-19 and where it was having a greater effect in denser areas? And then as it relates to the R1, the kind of single family residential, how do you see that all playing out with what's happening in Sacramento right now, right? There seems to be a disconnect from some of the stuff you're talking about here and what, Sacramento's trying to do and then what people are maybe trying to get away from as a result of COVID-19. I don't know. Just
agree. So let me break, and I think I agree with all those. I just want to look at it a little differently, and I'll do single family template in a minute. That's the next dashboard, right? So what really you're seeing in this dashboard is simply that multifamily values were increasing for new multifamily at 3 to 5% a year. It was a rocket ship. That's sort of the arc that you see just next to the dashed line. And all that's happened is that accretion in value to the real estate community and as reflected in rents has dropped a bit. It's still strong though. It's just that it's not as flourishing as it was before COVID. And so that's the point there. It's still a very strong for multifamily. And I think the only piece of legislation that it makes sense to me that's been discussed, I think is it Portantino maybe, is that it? The legislation that would say, look, we'll give you some sales tax if you shift to a residential mix on a failing retail property. That makes some sense to me because that's back to the point where we are giving away, essentially, we have entitlements and zoning, to me, are essentially liquidity for developers if we grant it. And the point is that in a failing retail market and in a surging residential market, the liquidity that we can give to a property ought to come back to us. And if the state would backstop that with some kind of sales tax reimbursement, we could really do something to turn these centers around. That's why it makes sense to me. Let me show you single family a little bit after, yeah, here's the single family dashboard. The trend here is that single family is very strong, and the reason is it's safer to live in a single family home. And it's actually, in my view, I think, as you'll see, impact on communities, it's reducing some of the density trends, and it's moving the density to suburban versus pure urban, which tends to be overdense. We're seeing it in New York, San Francisco, a little bit less in LA, but it's a factor. Now, is it a factor that stays with us? I just can't tell you. I'm looking and looking to see if I can understand the long-term trends. But right now, building suburban housing with outdoor comfort and amenities and work facilities is a pretty hot commodity. And that would do quite well in any location they can get the zoning from. It would do very well if we put some of that housing in failing retail centers where we have 50, 60 acres of land that is underperforming because it's all queued to parking and retail today. That's a use that can't be sustainable in this marketplace. So we're going to see, basically some incursion on single family housing. This, I think what the question was, is where, we have 1120 and others who are looking to subdivide single family. Listen, that market is endless. This is a policy discussion. I don't agree with 1120 for a minute, but the point is that the economics of it are very sustainable. You can split those lots, they'll be worth a lot of money. There's no doubt about it. These charts show that. Doesn't make it right from a policy standpoint. So residential recovery, what I'm saying, what's trending is that I'm seeing that shift is what I call suburban and low to mid density versus urbanish kinds of density, and more concentrated amenities in the suburbs where you have that open space, where you have that entertainment, where you use the outdoors amenities, where you take new residential sites and you birth them from dying malls and hotel properties. I think that's where the reset's going to come from us, that we will see. And I'll show you a case study that we're working on that I think is really emblematic of this trend. And then finally, industrial. Industrial is not the industrial we used to know in the smokestack world. This is digital industrial. It's all about distribution and e-commerce and cold storage in particular. You saw the metrics from Wall Street. They're reflected in these metrics. The strength in industrial comes from the replacement of retail as a delivery system for goods and services. That's what it comes from. And it affects us because it changes the location and derivation of our sales tax. It does create new unemployment. It is worth putting an investment to, but this is where your land use policy has to really think it through, because we think of industrial trucks, delivery, noise. Putting industrial, let's say, or a re-industrial delivery facility in a reset mall makes a lot of sense because those were already high traffic corridors. So that mix, again, will drive, I think, the strength, or that movement toward rekindling retail centers with a blend of uses will also drive more infill industrial as we move forward. And here's the industrial recovery as you can see it. These were the large, you see the Amazon Fulfillment Center, that's where that whole strategy started. But now it's moving to smaller facilities that can be basically continue the boom in e-commerce by providing delivery in real time, essentially real time. So those are the matrices. I mean, those are the dashboards. And I just summarize them. Here's the point. It's a new world. And when you make your land use decisions, when you talk to developers, you really need to figure out what you're willing to do and whether or not they are the right bet. Retail is just not the right bet anymore. You got to restructure that. And even Amazon is going to what we call frictionless retail. Today or yesterday, they opened up a series of stores that have absolutely no checkers. You just walk out with your goods and you don't go to jail. I mean, you just walk out, you pay digitally, and you see driverless delivery. You can see what's happening. The whole delivery system is changing. And that's why, whether it's what I call BOPUS, buy online, pick up in store, that's on the right, or whether it's frictionless retail, doesn't matter. It's just a different world. And the one on the middle where it says open on Amazon 24 hours, that is where you see the integration of a small shop being able to stay alive in a blended reuse center where you put them next to residential, but they still have to be online and they need to be next to residential to make their business model work. We call that omni-channeling. That's the future of retail, where delivery meets that service in the store. So I want to just quickly show you what I call are the new tools and the new rules. You have, I think, in economic development tools for post-COVID, you have 5 major tools that you can use. You've got the ability to move on the left from pure retail to a blended use. That's a zoning tool. You've got the ability to capture additional zoning that you can create. Remember, zoning is currency. If you're a developer in a COVID world, new density gives you currency to go get financing for a project that you can't otherwise get financed. Instead of approving specific plans that give the density away to the existing owners, add new density, put it in a bucket, in a savings account called Development Opportunity Reserve, and only give it to projects that accomplish things like blended use or bring events or services that generate trips. In other words, spend your capital, your zoning capital wisely, because you can't make mistakes in a COVID economy. Another tool, sales tax assessment revenue. When that center knocks on your door and says, I need zoning and I can't make it on retail, I need to go to a lot more residential, I want an industrial use in here and a delivery center, and you go, none of those really generate enough taxes. Although I talked to you about the shift in that residential tax picture, it's still not as accretive as a sales tax generator. You could say, look, I'll give you that development agreement, I'll give you that blended use, but you're going to give me some equivalent sales tax for 20 years in a development agreement. We call that sales tax assessment revenue. Again, that's using entitlements as currency. The number 2, Development Opportunity Reserve, uses zoning as currency or density. This one uses the development agreement entitlements as currency. You can create a special district. You can do 1, 2, and 3, and then move all of that within a special district called an EIFD, an Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, and collect the tax increment that comes from the density that you've used as currency. You're doubling down on your debt, on your bet, excuse me. And then final is just restructuring your debt. Have your finance director and city manager show you what your debt load is and what the rates are, because chances are, just like you and I could refinance a house at 2.75% interest, same things happen to us at cities. We can refinance. We can refinance CalPERS debt, which is charging us 7%. I just did 104 million for Carson. We went from a 7% rate to a 3.42% rate, $40 million in savings in a $100 million deal. So these are real numbers. Yes.
Thank you for that, Larry.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. So this is my snapshot of why existing, and this could be the Galleria. This happens to be the Laguna Hills Mall, 60 acres, opened in 73, anchored by Sears, JCPenney, and Macy's. I mean, can you imagine how quickly this has happened? At one point in our life, we would have been just exuberant about these 3 anchors. Those are anchors that are no longer anchors. And what they've done is they've rezoned. They've used zoning as currency. They're working on a development agreement. We're doing this deal with Merlone Geyer, who's redoing this into a blended use project. This is very typical. There's about 200 of these, by the way, in California. I mean, they're just large centers that can't operate anymore. They need to be shifted to what's more of what's on the right. Reimagining your downtown districts. We're working on all of these communities using that Development Opportunity Reserve and density to mix uses and shore up the retail that's now hurting. Development Opportunity Reserve in Buellton, which has had a sort of sideways retail district, we created a new specific plan with the Development Opportunity Reserve. We have hundreds of thousands of square feet in the Opportunity Reserve. We only give it away. Look at the benefits on the left. If a developer shows up and says, as part of a project, you give me zoning, you give me density zoning for residential, and I'll put in one of these things for you or more. That's the point, is you increase the density, you don't give it away, you only give it away in exchange for benefits and objectives that you pre-decide with your community's input. They get to see what's on the gift list. They get to pick that, you voted in, and then your staff does the trade-offs on a deal-by-deal basis. And all these deals still have to come back to you for final approval. Total control, zoning is currency.
Larry, Joe Buscaino, on that last slide, if I can, Madam President, Madam Chair, what if we have already updated our community plans as we've done in the San Pedro area? How can we, I mean, what would be your recommendation? I love this development opportunity reserve. But for those of us who have updated community plans, what would be your advice?
Yeah, so I think you have to look at that plan and see what you've allowed and see if COVID allows us to reconfigure or add additional density for uses that you didn't really allow as of right in your specific plan or community plan amendment, so you can use them as trade-off value. Or you can add more density, in other words. So those are things that, it's unfortunate. So, you know, Joe, you and I know each other well. So I just be blunt with you. My biggest nightmare is when I have clients that say, we just did a specific plan and we gave all the density away.
Right.
So, you know, it's just, you know, we've been preaching this for many, many years, but I think what happened, you know, when we had redevelopment, that gave us the ability to buy density in a way. And then we had a flourishing economy. So it seemed like we would make those trade-offs, but in this economy, you don't have much left. And so trying to be preemptive about capturing density you're willing to give away, storing it, and then giving it back based on a set of objectives that really benefits your community and that they understand the trade-offs for is really the way to go. If you've already done that at some level, we should look at what you haven't given away in that specific plan, because again, COVID is changing uses. It's changing the importance of outdoors. It's changing the importance of last mile delivery. So maybe you went ahead and gave zoning for density away, but you didn't do it for industrial. Maybe that's a way to sort of get back into the trade game, if you will.
Yeah, because with the updated community plan, all these development opportunities are now by right. But
yes,
post-COVID, I understand what you're saying. Appreciate that.
So I think it's just a forensic look at what you've done to see if we can carve out anything that's tradable. That's really what it comes down to.
Mr. Cosma, thank you so much. I would like to at this time ask if there are any questions for you. If any members have questions, please use the raise hand icon.
Sure. I'd like to show you one thing before I go, because I realize I'm using a lot of time. I have a couple of slides here that kind of just summarize this. Would that be okay, Olivia, if I could do about 3 minutes?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so here are the key factors, I think, for COVID recovery. For hotel, it's tagged to 2023. For retail, it's a resizing, it's blended use village. For office, it's a mixed bag. For residential, it's taking advantage of its zoning value. And for industrial, is realizing that it's a key part of the economy. Here's what really is the message for you. All of these recoveries are driven by this chart, right? When consumers return. Here's the interesting thing about this chart, and I know you'll see this anywhere. We've worked really hard at this at Cosmont. Everything in the green and the white on the right just show you, for example, 70% of the population sitting here today don't think they'll travel abroad for more than 6 months. We've only seen the top line move from left to right, and that's going out to eat. A couple of months ago, it was 20%. Now it's 30%. This just shows you the lingering effect of key consumer drivers that just aren't going to come back that soon. That's why these decisions that we make are important. Here's the prescription. Look at unsticking stuck deals if they make sense. Focus your planning on projects, not on planning. It's not a time for plans. It's a time for projects, and pursue the right opportunities. Recognize that reimagining for retail is your best. It's a once in a generation opportunity. You just have to be open to how you resplice it. But if you don't resplice it, it will die a slow death, because that's what's going on. And here's your checklist. Assess your land use, capture value through zoning, manage cash flow with low cost finance tools, identify any revenue funding opportunities you can get from other parties, and select your best projects. Here's your toolkit. It's there for you. We'd love to chat with you if you think you've got some ideas. The whole point of this presentation is just to open your thought process to the fact that it's a new world, it's a land use revolution, and you need to act sooner than later with a good idea of how to get done what you need to get done. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much. Let's see if there are any questions for you. Please use the raise hand icon if you have questions. Joe Buscaino, you have another question? Joe? Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Sorry, Madam Chair. And thank you, Larry, for your comprehensive report. And Jackie, thank you for bringing Larry in before us. As far as tourism, I know all of our cities really bank on TOT. I'm very concerned about the future of tourism. 1 in 9 jobs, very similar to the port, are impacted by the tourism industry. And just we heard from the LA Tourism Bureau, Convention Bureau in my committee last week that you may have seen they're launching a kind of staycation effort for, it's called the trifecta, where, you know, if we want to really get our economy, local economy back running, we want to encourage our residents to visit 3 restaurants, 3 museums, and stay 3 nights at a local hotel. So, so for colleagues, if we can push that message out, it's really going to hopefully do our part to bring back tourism in our respective.
And Joe, if I could just say, one way you can help, believe it or not, is to help the local hotel industry get the message out on cleanliness and safety. That's what's holding that part. Here's the crazy thing. Old hotels with outside corridors and single unit air conditioners, the ones that we would never want to make a reservation in, are the ones that are full. The vagabond inns of the world are full because people are on the road. They'll do a staycation, but they want to make sure they're not part of a centralized AC system, and they like the outdoor corridor where they don't have to get into an elevator. So I'm just suggesting there's different sizes and shapes of hotels, but the one underlying factor that really affects hotels is the belief that it's safe, the cleanliness theater. And so if your local vendors have done a good job, then help them promote that, because that's what gets the consumer confidence going.
So you're saying, Larry, we should all take a trip to Catalina, our next meeting?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Are there any other questions? Jackie, you have a question?
Yeah, first of all, Joe, if you can send us something we can tweet out, we can
Yes,
do that.
we have the video. We can send that out for sure.
Great.
That's commercial. That's airing locally, yes.
Great. Larry, I wanted to, maybe this isn't your bailiwick, but I hear all of this and I hear a complete change in traffic and goods movement and the way things are going to be working in our neighborhoods. Have you done any analysis on that?
No, not yet. I mean, we're really trying to understand the shifts in the supply chain. For example, one thing that's happened, I think Joe would say this too, is that some of the onshoring has occurred where, you know, jobs and basically goods are, you know, the production of goods have moved onshore because it's better to be closer than farther away. So that has an impact on supply chain and movement. So the answer is we're working on it, Jackie. We just don't understand all the logistics issues yet, and whether or not these recent trends, other than the retail and the digital delivery trend, which we know, other than that, we don't have a good understanding of the other ones yet.
Larry, George Chin has a question. George?
Hey, George.
Thank you. Larry, I was looking at your information and I'm reflecting back because I actually took a trip to Taiwan back this past January. I know our country had a leader that just visited there, a country of 23 million when I think at the time, 7 deaths. And I think about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, they had their first live concert started up with maybe 10,000 people. do you see this just as a United States trend that you're looking at, or what do you think is happening across internationally? Because I don't know. I'm just wondering.
George, I'll tell you, I think our focus has been the United States because we're really trying to figure out how California compares and what we can do. Because California's been hit very, very hard by COVID. Its economy has, and loss of jobs. So I'm not really sure about how to make fair comparisons internationally when this is a U.S. consumer survey that you have. It was last published in August, just a couple of weeks ago. This is updated. You can see where going to a concert lays on this diagram. It's not high.
Yeah, that's actually why I asked the question.
Yeah.
Because mixed use is very popular in a dense nation like Taiwan, but in the U.S. it's kind of spotty depending on where.
Correct. Yeah, I don't think I have a good answer for you on the international side. It's not what we've been looking at in terms of these consumer trends.
I guess what I'm getting at is, as we see the trend this way, this trend may switch very quickly.
Yes.
Once we get vaccine and therapeutics, right?
Oh yeah. Listen, I think these could turn not on a dime, but they can turn pretty quickly. It's the
right.
point of this is it shows you how much it has to turn, right? That's the key.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is then some of the trends we're going, we might want a little bit of a slow roll in betting on what our country's going to potentially look like in 6 months.
Right. And listen, that's why you saw where really the one that I say the once in a lifetime retail's just not coming back. You've got 300,000 in the middle. You've got 300,000 plus or minus square feet in the middle of these malls that wants to be 50,000 square feet based on the marketplace. That's not going to change. You have 3 or 4 anchors that want to leave or they're already gone. That's not going to change. Does it mean that all the retail goes? Absolutely not. It just means it's a different kind of retail, it's a different mix, and there's less of it. So to me, the only long-term land use change that really needs to be paid attention to in an accelerated way is the retooling of retail. I think hotel comes back. I think residential is still strong, industrial is still strong. It's really a focus on how you reimagine a blended use operation versus a retail driven operation.
Let me ask one more question, if I may, Larry. So sure. I think I read some data maybe a week ago. Some of the big box stores, such as maybe Sam's, Costco, Target, Lowe's, Home Depot, are actually doing pretty well.
Very well.
Do you know that includes like people like you and I walking in, or they're doing? Because I go to Costco pretty regularly, and I kind of joke with our new city manager. I said, what if we jokingly asked Simon if they could change their name for the next 6 months and call it Costco Simon? Then we check people at the door, and then within the Alamo Mall, the little shops would be sub Costco's.
Right.
It seems like we have a way to control this thing, just like the Costco's and the Walmarts and the Targets.
Yeah, I think those are the stars of the retail revolution. And why? Because if you look at the similarity between Amazon on the left, Costco, Target, and Walmart on the right, forget about Lowe's for a minute, I'll get to there. They've done 2 things, right? They have figured out how to use either they figured out how to put distribution centers in or how to use their current facilities as distribution centers. That's why you can buy online, pick up in the store. And by the way, as soon as Best Buy figured that out, they started to do well. You saw their numbers came in very strong. So all that is really a shift from looking at their retail store as a retail store to looking at their retail store as a distribution center. And those companies have done well. It's those middle companies, but those weren't the companies, by the way, that were anchoring these regional centers. Those were the Macy's and the JCPenney's. They never really did that. And so now they're late to the game, and essentially Amazon has dissected them, I think, in many ways. It's the middle of the malls that I'm also concerned about. Those are that small operators, like you saw that little picture of open on Amazon 24 hours. There are a lot of internet retailers that are going to come physical because they realize they do better if they have a physical presence, but they also have figured out that they have to do that omni-channeling, that they have to converge their physical presence with their retail presence, like a Warby Parker or someone like that. So it's just a different retail world. The winners, clearly the ones that have used their distribution centers well, like Target, Walmart, Costco. Amazon, clearly the winner. And then on the right, you've got Lowe's and Home Depot because people are staying home and improving their houses. And they also have a pretty good digital platform, especially Lowe's. That's what it is. It's all convergence retail. And that's why this opportunity that's on the screen is really about shifting from purely that retail to a blend of uses, recognizing that there's winners and losers for sure.
Larry, we have other questions. I want to make sure we get to them.
Yes, sure.
Chris Horvath.
Yeah, Larry. So you kind of ended there saying, focus on projects, not planning. And I just wanted to just have you briefly elaborate on that. Are you talking about like public works type projects, or are you talking about PPP type thing? Like what was there something in specific, that you had in mind when you were saying that?
Yeah, both. I think that, let me use, for example, I just use the Redondo Beach Galleria as a possibility. It says my internet's unstable. Can you still hear me? Am I okay? Yeah, okay. We already know that the entitlements that were delivered, a while ago may not really work in this new COVID economy. So I would not focus on what we gave away in entitlements. I would see if there's another project there that makes sense. That's kind of what I'm getting to. In terms of infrastructure, I would focus on projects a little bit like we have in Manhattan Beach, try and make whatever improvements we can to local streets. And you've done that also in Redondo Beach, in the Village area, where you're basically changing the character of the street with a series of small projects, maybe infrastructure improvements, whether it's signage, whether it's redirection of parking, whether it's other little improvements that really become important to the immediate economy. So it's a combination of public projects and the private projects that are asking for help that makes sense to help, because you can get them to a solution faster if you focus on their project rather than looking to mend your general plan or your specific plan.
Hildy Stern has a question.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, Larry. This was so helpful, so much information. I'm wondering, as we're often challenged in anticipating planning challenges, we're often looking at changing demographics to determine what the future will look like in any one of our cities. And I'm wondering how that is impacted in any of these models and any of these suggestions, and maybe specifically when we look at what is coming back, whether it's retail or the tourism industry in 3 years. When it comes back, do any of these models anticipate the changing demographics that will also be in our near future?
Yes, I think they do, because I don't have a slide here, but I have a slide that really shows that Generation Z and millennials become 75% of the spending dollar within the next couple of years. And those population groups, Hildy, in my view, are looking for a more integrated existence, right? They want to be near shopping. They want to be, sort of in the mix. They want urban amenities in a suburban setting. That's really what's going on. And so I think that pattern is already definable. I really do. I can show you those demographics. I just don't have them as part of this presentation. The question is how do you translate that into a set of land uses that really takes advantage of that? I'll give you a crazy example. I just finished a deal for the city of Cypress in Orange County. 13 acres. It was a former redevelopment agency site. We sold it to Shea. Shea's going to develop, and this is through COVID. We're closing the deal in November. Everything's approved. They're going to build 251 residential units. They're changing those residential units to have more workspace and outdoor amenities and a different filtration system. So they're already working on that. Guess what the anchor for the retail, which is now down. By the way, that was a project that 4 years ago was going to be all retail, 150,000 square feet. Now it's down to 30,000 square feet of retail. And guess what the anchor was? A coffee shop. The first folks that they leased to was something like called Black Cat Coffee. They're in Laguna Beach. I forget what it's. And I asked the leasing guy, I said, and I knew the answer. I said, look, why would you like give all the marbles away to a coffee? He says, without the coffee shop, I don't get nearly as much rent and I don't get the other food users because that's a daily trip. And so I'm just trying to give you an example that those demographics are already defining themselves in the leasing marketplace. We know what that demographic wants to be next to and how they want to live. It's just a question on the government side, can we make those kinds of land uses with reduced retail densities and increased residential densities and infill distribution work for us economically? Those are the models that we have to work on.
Thank you.
Larry, thank you so much for that comprehensive,
Yeah, you're
really
welcome.
useful report. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it. We could really listen to it all night, but unfortunately, we do have to move on. But thank you so much. And I reserve the right to invite you back another time because I'm sure your models are constantly changing and probably you'll have something else for us in a few months.
Yeah, let's stay tuned. It's fast moving. Thank you, Jackie and Olivia, for all of you for having me tonight.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
And you too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Now we'll move on to the South Bay COG collaboration with cities on adaptation strategies. Naomi Albert.
Yes.
Jackie, you're going to introduce her?
Yes, I'd like to introduce Naomi. We've had a Civic Spark Fellow. That's Naomi is a postgraduate student who has done incredible work for us. We've been very lucky. We have had Naomi for 11 months working for us. And this is a typical example of how the COG adds value to the city's work. We're helping cities meet state requirements as you update your plans. And we looked at what an adaptation strategy and the vulnerability assessments that Naomi has done would cost if a city had to go do it themselves. And we're finding cities that have paid $75,000 to $130,000 for what we're doing for cities for free, working with your staff. So we're really excited about what Naomi, she has a short presentation for you, but it's really important because your cities have a deadline to have adaptation in at least one of your plans or referenced in your general plan by 2022. And now our cities will have that. So I'm going to turn it over to Naomi and then I'll come back at the end. Naomi?
Thank you, Jackie, for the introduction, and thank you all for having me here tonight. I'm happy to be here. Be sharing my screen. So as Jackie mentioned, I've been a Civic Spark Fellow with the South Bay COG for the last 11 months, and I'm going to be going over the Climate Adaptation Project, which we've been working on with cities. So to give you a little bit of background on this project, the COG has been working on climate planning with cities for many years now. This work really began with greenhouse gas emissions inventories, and then also the development of climate action plans, both at the city level and also a sub-regional climate action plan. And those plans were adopted in 2018. So once the climate action plans were adopted, the COG shifted focus to helping cities with their climate adaptation planning. And this was really initiated through the work of a prior Civic Spark Fellow in 2019, who worked with cities to develop city-specific climate vulnerability assessments and also developed a sub-regional climate adaptation plan. And these plans were developed in 2019. So before I get any further, I just wanted to quickly go over the difference between climate action and climate adaptation. So the climate action plans really focus on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and our contribution to climate change, whereas the climate adaptation strategies focus on preparing our communities for the impacts of climate change, which we're already seeing occurring. So the climate adaptation strategies that we worked with city staff to identify are intended to address each city's vulnerabilities to climate change by helping the community adjust and prepare for impacts and build resilience to changing conditions. So the resource documents that we've created with city staff are intended to help staff update their city plans, such as the general plan, local hazard mitigation plan, or climate action plan. And in addition to building the region's resilience to climate change, these can also support cities' compliance with Senate Bill 379, which is the state legislation that requires climate adaptation planning in city plans. So the climate adaptation strategies that we worked with cities to identify were grouped into these categories, and these categories are intended to address the city's vulnerabilities that were identified in the reports completed in 2019. So these are a sampling of how they were grouped. So for example, some of the strategies addressed precipitation changes, sea level rise, extreme heat, loss of biodiversity, grid vulnerability, increased wildfire risk, and some also were focused on financing, the implementation, and multiple hazards. So we had 8 cities participate in this project, and they are the cities that are highlighted in blue on this table here. And cities that didn't participate often already had some sort of adaptation strategies in city plans already, or we're going to address this at a later date through an update, in many cases to the general plan. So this map also shows the cities that participated. We had 2 inland cities participate, 2 beach cities, and then 4 of the peninsula cities. So many cities were interested in addressing the risk to wildfire. 7 out of the 8 cities chose at least one strategy that addressed wildfire risk, whether it be wildfire smoke, risk to vulnerable populations, or actual physical risk of wildfire to the cities. Many cities were also interested in strategies that addressed precipitation changes and increased their flood and water supply resilience. Again, 7 out of the 8 cities chose at least one strategy from this category. And then many cities were also interested in addressing their vulnerability to extreme heat. 7 out of the 8 cities, again, chose at least one strategy that addressed extreme heat. And then cities also were interested in strategies that addressed impacts like biodiversity, grid vulnerability, sea level rise, and food security. So this table shows some of the popular climate adaptation strategies that were chosen by multiple cities. So we came to city staff all with the same list of climate adaptation strategies, and many cities selected some of the same strategies. So for example, 6 out of the 8 cities selected the strategy, develop a protocol to notify residents about adverse air quality from wildfire and provide education on air quality safety best practices. So I'm not going to go through all of the strategies that were popular with cities, but I just wanted to mention that there was a lot of overlap in interest of strategies. So this really highlights potential for future coordination of efforts. And these again are more of the popular adaptation strategies chosen by multiple cities. So the way that these strategies will be used really varies by the city, but many cities are interested in updating an existing city document. So for example, 2 of the cities are interested, or at city staff at least, indicated that they're interested in updating the general plan with adaptation strategies. 2 of the cities indicated interest in updating the climate action plan with an adaptation chapter. City staff from 1 city indicated interest in updating both the local hazard mitigation plan as well as the general plan. And staff from 1 city are interested in creating a climate adaptation plan. So some of the barriers to the project were really a lack of staff capacity to engage fully in the project due to limited time to really engage, as well as loss of knowledge of previously developed documents such as the city vulnerability assessments and previously developed climate action plans. And in addition, COVID-19 pandemic really created more barriers, especially barriers of staff time to be able to focus on the project, and also, not being able to meet in person. We all kind of had to readjust to that over the last year. So the outcome of the project are that now cities have documents containing staff-selected climate adaptation strategies, as well as implementation examples and introductory language that can be used as a resource to update city plans. And through this process, city staff have a greater understanding of climate change adaptation, And the COG also has an enhanced understanding of how the organization can support city adaptation efforts through future programming, because now we know what strategies multiple cities are interested in. And in addition to providing the strategy document, we've also created some tools to help cities continue to move forward with strategies. So we've created a strategy and hazard prioritization tools, a publisher template for a climate action or adaptation chapter for a plan, as well as a city council report and presentation templates that can be used by staff to help bring strategies to adoption. So the next steps are really for city staff to continue an interdepartmental review and prioritization of their preliminary list of staff-selected strategies, and for cities to engage community members and gather feedback on these draft strategy documents. The next step would then be for cities to adopt strategies through their city processes. And the COG will continue to implement the sub-regional climate adaptation strategies that were adopted in the South Bay Sub-Regional Climate Adaptation Plan, and continue to pursue opportunities to support member cities, such as working with cities to seek additional funding to continue adaptation planning and implementation. So that's all I have today, so I'll open it up to any questions at this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there questions, please? Use the raise hand icon, please. Are there questions? John Cruikshank has a question.
Thank you, Chairperson. Naomi, thank you for the presentation. And we appreciate all the help you gave our city with our plan. One of the things that we would be thrilled to learn about is, how we go about measuring our success and what tools we can use to measure our success. So I wondered, is that something you're also working on as we kind of look at our plans and see how we're doing, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been working with the COG for the last 11 months through a fellowship, and my fellowship is ending in August. And so the amount that we've been able to complete in this time frame is solely providing adaptation strategies. But we are recommending that going forward, that when staff select the final list of climate adaptation strategies, that they also identify indicators so that those could be monitored going forward to understand, how strategies are performing. So that would be a next step.
Okay, great, thank you.
Naomi, this is Olivia. You mentioned that the cities need to formally adopt the adaptation strategies. And my city was one of those that worked with you to draft the strategy. But you're saying the city has to actually formally adopt it through its processes. Is that correct?
So it is up to each city how they plan to use this resource document. And so they could adopt as they see fit in different city documents, and how they would be adopted really depends on each individual city and how you choose to proceed. But for them to be implemented, it would normally go through some sort of adoption process.
All right, thank you. I'll inquire further. That's why I'm asking. Thank you.
Before we say goodbye to Naomi, we really are saying goodbye to Naomi. She mentioned that she has worked with us for 11 months, and her 11 months are over at the end of this week. And she's done an incredible job, as you can all see. We're very delighted to wish her good luck in her new position. She's going to be working at the city of San Luis Obispo. They're very lucky to have her. And I hope you'll join me in wishing her well.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Naomi.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you all.
Great
Pleasure to
job.
talk to you all today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the transportation report from
Steve Lance is going to give the transportation report.
Okay.
And
All right.
I think he has a couple of things to say that are going to be interesting.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Hi, everybody. We had a 5.5-hour Metro board meeting this morning. It was unbelievable in the amount of stuff that they covered. For our purposes, I'm going to give you 5 bullet points. It won't take 5.5 hours, I hope. But the 5 things that I wanted to mention was Metro, for the first time, is actually setting aside $400,000 in their budget and putting public art on the buses. And they're actually dedicating a specific proportion of space on the buses for public art for the first time. They've always had an art program, but this is the first time it's become specific as to budget and allocation of space. Secondly, our Measure M MSP projects were approved today. So if you have an MSP project that went through our tortuous process over the last 6 months, you're now eligible to sign a funding agreement with Metro and get that project underway. So the third thing, the revenue service hours for Metro service have been a big controversy at Metro. Some of the advocates want them to continue to provide 7 million hours of service, despite the fact that they don't have the riders. What Metro has decided to do is to provide about 80% of that, 5.2 million, and grow it a little over the next couple of years to serve that ridership demand, which is about half. One of the reasons that they have to do that is that they have social distancing requirements that they never had before. And so it's going to take a lot more service to carry the reduced number of folks. The next thing that we got into was a long discussion with a lot of activity from the board, questioning staff on the status of the Crenshaw LAX project. As you all know, the Crenshaw LAX project has had some challenges. We were asked to put in some more money. $90 million was needed to get the project finished. They just did the update today, and their principal problems are they have a significant volume of unfinished testing. So they've built the structures and you're starting to see the trains run, but there's very complex testing that has to be done to make sure the trains run safely. And they are way behind. They're only at 9% on that testing when they should have been much further along. They also have technical difficulties with the consultant. They're running over budget, and those always create tensions about who's at fault and who has to correct what. Third thing is the consultant doesn't have enough resources on the project to finish by December. The staff came to the board today and said, we are concerned, even though the Walsh has told us they can finish this job by December, we are concerned that they don't have enough resources on the job to get it done by the deadline. And then finally, there was a discussion on repairs of deficient work. And that deficient work, Jim Butts actually asked, like what? Give me 3 examples of deficiencies. In one case, they had conduit that they had put in the subway wall and they forgot to cap it. So the conduit got filled with concrete. In another case, they had problems pulling wiring in, so they still don't have power to most of their stations. They're going to have to repair that wiring in order to have the stations have their power. And the third one, that same wiring problem apparently damaged some transformers to the point that they're going to have to be replaced. These are all considered by Metro, first time publicly today, as workmanship issues that are delaying the contract being completed in a timely way. Now, what they said is there's a wonderful contractor, he's doing his job, he assures us he can get done on time, and then they spent a lot of time, the board members spent a lot of time discussing that with him. The big item was a surprise to everyone. In Phil Washington's CEO report, he announced that he's creating an internal task force to explore and implement by January 1st of next year, free fares on the Metro bus and rail system. Free fares. Okay, right now they get 16% of the revenue from the fare box. They're going to have to find a way to replace that revenue. So he's on a search for additional money. This task force that he's created, its expected outcome is to identify, study, present all facts, challenges, and issues relating to eliminating fares on metro buses and trains, including, and then there's a whole laundry list of the things that they need to accomplish. One of the things that they need to accomplish is how do you coordinate a fare-free metro system with the other systems that base their fares on a multiple of metros. So example, Access Services, their fare is twice Metro's fare. Well, if Metro's fare is 0, anything times 0 is 0. So how are they going to backfill? Metrolink has the same kind of an issue where they have 5 agencies that are trying to contribute. And if Metro decides they want to offer a free fare, the other counties are going to have to decide whether that's possible or not. So these are huge challenges, very complex issue. Metro's going to have to replace, I think in here it says $250 to $300 million in fares, starting if he wants to do this in January. I was expecting a lot of questions. Mostly what we got from the board members was applause to Phil for being so innovative. Phil positioned it as a national model of the way that transit should be paid for, not through fares, but through subsidies, like any other public service that's paid for through general revenues. One of the things that he's going to be exploring with this task force is this traffic reduction model or initiative. The traffic reduction initiative is basically congestion pricing, in which they would charge people to get across town, and that money would be used to subsidize transit. The question was asked by one of the board members. I know who it was. It was Garcia from Long Beach, who asked, what about the munis? And the answer was, yes, we have to talk to them as well, because how do you run a system where Metro is free and there's transfer policies between Metro and the muni operators? What kind of a fare structure are they going to have? And so they have independent operations that set their own fares. So we don't yet know and won't know for some time how this is all going to come together. But it was very roundly appreciated and applauded by the board members as being the kind of innovation that we need to accomplish to change the way that transit is positioned in mobility and in the economy. Was that fair, Jackie, on short?
Yes, but I just noticed that Mayor Butts is on the call.
Oh, good.
Mayor Butts, did you want to say anything?
You want to fix anything I said? Please do.
I don't know if he's there now. He's there, but I don't think he's at his desk.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I can't tell. Anyway, the one thing I did want to add is that I want to emphasize for all of you that they are talking about traffic reduction, and even in. Hi, you're back? You're there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, look, one thing that you got to correct, Mayor Butts asked, how are we going to pay for this?
Right.
And,
that was his first question. Absolutely.
And Phil didn't answer it directly. He answered it philosophically. And okay, but the reality is it's going to be a completely different business model, and we haven't figured out how it's going to be paid for. He hasn't figured out how it's going to be paid for. So it was great. Everybody applauded it. It was a great thing to think about, but we're way in the hole right now. So, we're not there yet.
Well, what I was going to say is that at the last policy committee where the subregions were there and some of the other people, we had a big discussion about the fact that Metro changed congestion pricing to something called traffic reduction. And the idea is that they're going to be tolling this, what they told us, is they're going to be tolling roads, and they're going to use the toll money to pay for free transit. And they're calling it traffic reduction. So that when you look at the budget survey that I got in the email, just now asking me what my priorities are, one of my priorities that I could mark is traffic reduction, but it doesn't say what that is. So I just think I think it's something we really have to pay a lot of attention to.
Right.
Are there questions for Steve or for Jim? Thank you, Steve.
Christian's got a question.
Thank you. Pardon me?
Christian has a question.
Okay.
Steve, I just wanted to ask, it wasn't in your report, but they approved the EIR for the northern extension of the Crenshaw line today. Is that correct?
I believe they did.
Yeah. I
You
was
know that, Jim? Did they, or did they hold it over a month?
Oh, no.
No, they approved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, so, all right, you know, you're not going to have the answer to this question, but it's something we've discussed at Transportation Committee and, or at least internally is, can we get the Y interchange looked at as a part of that EIR? So that'll probably be a conversation offline because.
It would be.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
B has her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of concerned about this trend, to tell you the truth. I mean, it kind of helps explain why several years ago when Phil Washington came to speak to the COG and I asked him about why they don't have the subway systems work like they do in Washington, D.C., where you have to pay first and you stick your ticket in and that allows you to get through the turnstile instead of having cops go to the platform and check if people have their card, their tap card with them. And he, just said, well, it costs money to do that. Apparently wasn't planning on charging money. So now it becomes clear. I just don't think that's appropriate to charge taxpayers for other people riding. I mean, is there any way to stop this trend and say, people who use should pay for the service?
That's Metro policy, actually.
What's
And
Metro?
it's Metro has to decide that policy. That's the very crux of the matter. Is are they going to charge to use their service or not? One of the things that they're looking at is the cost of operating and maintaining that fare collection equipment. That'll be an argument for doing away with fares because they would then not have that cost. So I don't think that there wasn't much interest today at the board in making the kind of decisions that Phil needs to decide by December. If they're open to looking at it, but they haven't decided anything yet. I think.
Are there more questions? Are there any other questions?
Yes, my hand is raised.
Okay, go ahead, please.
So, Steve, you made a comment about Phil Washington is talking about getting funding from toll roads. It was my understanding that toll money had to remain within the corridor. So how would they be able to draw down that money for offsetting the cost for bus fares?
Two things would have to happen. One, it would have to be an eligible use of the funding, which would require, I believe, a change in state law that is being pursued as we speak, so that you could use highway money for transit projects. That would if Metro has given notice to the state legislature, and they could implement that policy as soon as July of next year. The second thing is whether there's a distinction between the kind of money that's used for purposes that it's used versus the geographic area in which it's used. I'm not sure yet. I don't think anybody's sure yet how that.
But I think that if they want to do this, they'd have to write state legislation to allow them to do it, probably. So.
To use highway money for transit, they would. Mm-hmm. And the express lanes specifically, I believe it's Metro policy that the funds have to stay in the corridor of origin.
I thought it was state law.
I'm not sure that's true. I'd have to check that out. Because they've talked about using it around the system. And maybe that would take another piece of state legislation. I'm just not sure.
Are there any other questions? If not, we'll move on to South Bay Council of Government Program Action Items, Reports, and Updates. Jackie?
Okay. This is a program that LA County has started, and it was taken to the steering committee, and the steering committee is recommending approval of the COG participating in LA versus Hate. The LA versus Hate campaign is a community-centered campaign to encourage support of all residents of LA County to unite against and report and resist hate. At the LA versus Hate website, and Natalie okay, sharing your screen. This is the website, and I wanted to show it to you because they're making posters by local artists that you can commission for your city, or we could have one that said South Bay versus Hate, and they will make, and the local artists put them together, and then they can be posted on your website or used as background to your Zoom screen or put on your buses. The resources are to help build community strength with friends and family on the importance of standing up to hate. The idea is if you're a victim and it's a hate crime or it's just an incident, you might not want to call the police, but the county would like you to report the incident at 211. It would be safe, it's anonymous, and 211 is not affiliated with law enforcement. They have case managers that follow up on those calls. And I found out that from January to July, they had 250 calls describing hate acts in the LA County. About 31 were hate crimes. 26% were against Blacks, 17% Asian Pacific Islanders, 15% Mexican, 13% gay men, 8% white, 5% Jewish. So they're all over the map. So the idea is that the COG would endorse this. We would try to, we would ask for a sign that said South Bay versus Hate that we could put on our website, and any of your cities could also do the same. And the recommended action is from the steering committee is to ask the board to endorse this effort, the 211 call and South Bay versus Hate posters. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. I can answer any questions.
Is there a cost involved?
No, there's no cost involved. And LA County is the only, as best as I can understand, I've been participating in a committee. They're the only agency in the United States that's doing something like this. And they want to use the reporting to help them figure out where they should be putting resources.
I move for support. Second.
Franklin and Horvath, do you want to take a reverse roll call?
Yes, let's take a reverse roll call.
Where are you, David?
I'm here. One second. Okay, so anybody opposing, supporting the endeavor? Any abstentions? Nope. Okay, so then all in favor of supporting LA
You don't have to say
is
no.
It's everybody. I mean,
it's everybody.
Everybody
right.
is supporting. Yes.
Okay, so then if Madam Chair, I'll just go on.
Yes,
on the
please.
fiber network, we're very excited. We're on pace on the core ring and connections to our 2 point of presence centers. They're completed and will be functioning as of Monday, August 31st. The core ring is completing work order number 1. The operation of the ring means that we will actually have a new network in the South Bay. It's working, it's up and working. Additional network points, we're connecting 2 data centers, Equinox and Evoke, to which are 2 points of presence. And I'm trying to read my notes here. The 2 points to the web will be connected outside the South Bay, and the access to cloud services will be available at those 2 data centers, Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. South Bay Fiber Network will be dedicated, and will have a dedicated 10 gigabit ring with information flowing on the core bidirectionally, allowing us resiliency and minimal latency, which is delay. So there should there be any damage to the network. Work order 2 continues, construction of the first 27 connections to your city's designated sites. 15 sites are lit and being used. 5 sites are scheduled to come online on August 31st. By mid-October, all cities will be connected to the fiber network. By mid-November, work order 2 will be completed. Work order 3 has just begun. 12 sites were identified for the connection, and planning and design have begun. The estimated target date for the completion of work order 3 is the end of the calendar year. I hope that you will all feel as proud as I am that we were able to do this, and we did it pretty much on time, and your cities will now have service that they would never have been able to get by themselves. It's something the COG put together, and I think we should all pat ourselves on the back. So that's the report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The SCAG Regional Early Action Program funds.
Okay. These are the funds that I mentioned to you last time. SCAG is giving subregions, they're not giving us money, but they're allocating approximately $600,000 to us for funding that will help cities promote housing. We have to show a nexus on how to promote housing. There have been suggestions from our city. Most of the respondents. Okay, I've asked all of our cities where they are with their housing element, because we can help you with that. 9 cities have responded, 6 haven't, so I'm still waiting for more responses. We've gotten some suggestions for the REAP program on dealing with protected units, looking at seismic surveys. We don't know if SCAG will approve some of these things, but somebody asked for a consultant to interpret and guide our cities through housing legislation. I don't know if SCAG would approve something like that, but we will be discussing those things with staff. Wally is on the line, and Wally has another idea that is something straight out of our sustainable strategy that we would also planning to recommend. And I don't know, Wally, you want me to continue, or do you want to do this?
Let me just summarize. I also went to 2 technical assistance webinars the last 2 weeks, and I can summarize this really simply. Sacramento is the anti-Cosmont. Everything he just preached, they're doing the opposite. So where he's saying projects not planning, I would say they have increased by a factor of 10 the planning that you have to do in order to comply with the housing element stuff. It is close to a scandal, in my opinion. It is just dreadful. And where he's talking about people are not wanting residential density, of course they are pushing density in single family neighborhoods. Right. So the bottom line here is, and I've written a bunch of white papers on this stuff, but the bottom line is that it's time to muscle up. I think that there's some talk in this about the RENA reform, and there is a people who are pursuing this, and I think the COG should join in. They simply got to change the models and the allocation, and we really have to muscle up against this continuing opportunity, the continuing challenge to single family zoning, where the state goal is to eliminate it, and that's just flat out wrong. So that's sort of that. But what Jackie's referring to is that I've been talking for some time. I worked with SCAG earlier on this year with one of their data people in 2019 to take a look at identifying the sites, the commercial sites in the South Bay that would be most likely to be candidates to redevelop into housing. And the intent here is to give the cities, as they're getting impressed by the RENA numbers, to have some alternative to putting density into single family neighborhoods. We're not clear because they're really looking very, very stringently at these requirements. We're hoping that we can get this funded out of that pot of money so we can identify places that the cities could consider rezoning to put in housing, commercial properties, whether it's strip retail, probably strip retail more than anything else, but maybe look also at the malls and the hotels, as Cosmont said. So we'll keep you posted, but that's what we're going to try to go forward with to SCAG and try to convince them on that. But we got to start talking about muscling up here. This is ridiculous. The planning that you're required to do is obscene.
Thank you, Wally. Other questions for Wally? All right, senior services.
Britt, did you want to say anything, or you're muted? You're muted.
There we go. Hello. Just to mention that our next senior working group is Tuesday, September 22, 9:30 to 11:30. And since it's on Zoom, all of you can just attend without having to drive all over town. So would love to have anyone who would like to participate as we continue to encourage our senior centers around the South Bay in the kinds of services they're providing while being closed down in terms of food services and so forth. So I don't know if Grace has anything.
Yeah, Grace is actually on vacation, but she told me that the agenda will include an overview of the plans for a standalone LA County Department of Aging. that the Department of Supervisors approved. And then we will also be discussing available county resources. So they're always very interesting meetings, and that will be September 22nd. And
Sorry, the date again is September 22nd?
Yes.
Tuesday, September 22nd. Yes,
And-
9:30.
and
No, we can
9:30?
the link. Yes.
Okay, I can go on with homeless. The item that was added to the agenda was an MOU with Redondo Beach and the COG. We're going to be doing this with Redondo Beach, and we're probably going to come back at some point with an MOU with Torrance, because when the county gave us funding for innovation funds, the board has already approved the use of those funds. And two of our cities, Torrance and Redondo, were getting special project funds out of that. We already approved that Redondo would get $245,287 for something that is called its Enhanced Response Pilot Program. This is a program that focuses on individuals with a criminal history who are experiencing homelessness. And I know Christian can talk more about it, but this is the MOU that allows us to provide Redondo Beach the funds that we had said we were going to be allocating to them. So the recommendation is that you approve these funds for Redondo, this contract for Redondo Beach.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval.
That was Rodney made the motion. Is there a second?
Second, Buscaino.
And can we have the roll?
Sure.
We have a reverse roll call?
Yep.
Reverse roll call.
Any opposed to approving the MOU? Any abstaining from approval? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing with homeless, the next Homeless Services Committee meeting is on Wednesday, September 2nd. So that's next week from 3 to 5 on Zoom. There will be an overview on something called Pallet Shelter, which is an interim housing solution. And Grace has actually seen their presentation and found it very interesting. Also, I don't know, Natalie, if you have this up there, we've started something called Home Share South Bay, and this is our new logo. Home Share South Bay is a pilot program that we're going to be working on. And Silver Nest is the organization that is helping us. We're looking for a graduate intern or anybody you think it would be able to help us to implement this pilot program. The idea is to take people who have maybe a big home and want somebody to share it with them, maybe to prevent homelessness or to help someone get out of homelessness. So thank you for sharing the screen, Natalie. And any help that you can give us finding someone, an intern or somebody like that, if you know of anybody, please let us know. And that's all I have on homelessness. In the interest
the next is Tech Talk.
Tech Talk. We had our first Tech Talk on the cyber security issues in cities, and unfortunately, we asked for evaluations. We only got a couple of evaluations. I don't think it was exactly what the cities were hoping for. The consultant couldn't talk about Torrance because it's still an open case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be meeting with your IT directors, and I also want to talk to any council member that is interested in this subject. I want to form a subcommittee. I know that Mark Henderson is an IT director in his regular life. Michael Kemps from Palos Verdes Estates works in IT, and anybody else that you know that's on the board that can have an IT interest in IT, please let me know. And we're going to start meeting and talking about kinds of tech talks that we can bring to cities. The purpose of this is that we now have this network and we can bring it to life. I heard Mayor Garcetti this morning talking about one-stop shops in the city of LA. We can do all of that with our network. The question is, where do we want to put our resources? So that's the Tech Talks.
Thank you. So on August 29th, we had our second police practices dialogue on Zoom. All you want to know about police practices. And it was led by Mayor Jim Butts. I thought it was extremely well received and very well done. Jim, would you like to say something about it?
Is he still here? Oh, there. I don't know if he's, I don't know if
he shows that he's muted.
You're muted, Jim, if you, if you want.
Now I'm not muted. Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. So in a nutshell, what we talked about was the nuts and bolts of being a partner with your police chief and understanding how departments work, getting some rudimentary understanding of police culture and the impact that has on the situations that cities find themselves in right now. And, I gave a few tips as to how to understand the metrics of how your police chief is performing and overseeing a police department. And in fact, I think Joe, it was Joe, I think it was his number. He texted me about one of the things that I told Jackie I forgot to mention, and that was to ask about the number of police investigations, administrative investigations that time out, that run up against the 1-year statute that 3300 of the government code provides that whenever a personnel in the department that can initiate an investigation of alleged misconduct, a year from that date, the investigation must be completed and a disposition rendered, or the most that can happen to the employee is that a written notation is made in their file. And this is what some chiefs do when they have a very problematic allegation that they think is going to have a detrimental impact on morale. Some chiefs just let them time out. And so that's something that you can't let happen. So I enjoyed myself. I hope everybody else enjoyed it as well.
Yes, Jim, I just wanted to mention that particular advice, especially as it relates to excessive force cases. I was very, very interested in that because all of the cities have issues with excessive force cases. I know that from our ICRMA meetings where they talk about, how our insurance is going up because of the excessive force cases. So I know that this is something we have to focus on. And so I found that very informative. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
Are there any
I wanted to mention that we don't have to stop here. I asked for evaluations and we got 6 evaluations of a couple more, Jim, since I sent them to you, and they were all 5s and one person said 4. So they were really great. But one of the people said, what we should have more forms. Well, everybody said we should have more forms, but what they were saying is we should poll the board if there's any other ideas. I don't know if Jim, if you left a lot on the table that you wanted to say, but there was a feeling by at least the people that responded that we should continue doing this. And so I welcome your ideas if you want to continue.
I absolutely think it would be helpful because, see, there are so many case studies right now that occur daily that are reported. For instance, the Jacob, and I forget the gentleman's last name, the person that was shot in the back.
Lake or somebody?
Kenosha, Wisconsin. And then you had the same day or the next night. So you have this gentleman that he may have been a good guy, bad guy, what have you, but the reality is the tactics were terrible. There was no reason to shoot this man in the back 7 times. If you were going to detain him, make a strong move to detain him on the passenger side of the car. But once he made it to the driver's door, then you needed to, if you felt he was a danger, to retreat, seek cover, de-escalate. And if the guy left, you got his license plate, you know who he is, get him another day. He had 3 children in the car. It was absolutely outrageous. And I'm going to say outrageous to do that. The same, the next night, you had an armed white male carrying an assault rifle, a rifle of some type slung across the front of him, that was allowed into the protest area. The officers offered him water, and then he got into an altercation with protesters. He got knocked to the ground, got up, fired and hit 3 people, killing 2. Officers coming to the call of the altercation drove right.
You're muted again. Somehow you're muted. Jim, you're muted. We lost him. Are you all there?
I can hear you, but I can't hear Jim.
I can hear you. He's still muted.
Yeah, he's muted. We lost him. Well, okay. So if he doesn't come back, my question is, if you'd like us to work on additional meetings, please, oh, now you're back. Please let me know. Jim,
Okay.
we lost
Wait
you.
a minute. Oh, you lost me. Okay, now I've
Yeah.
been talking all this time.
Yeah,
What I
no,
said-
you hit he hit someone and killed 2 people is where we lost you.
Oh yes, hit and killed 2 people, and then the officers coming to the call, he put his hands up thinking he was going to be arrested, has the rifle slung across his chest, walks towards the armored vehicles with his hands up, and they drive right past him. So what does that tell you? That they considered a black male going into the car dangerous enough to shoot in the back, but they're going to a call of people being shot, and they walk past a white male with his hands in the air surrendering with a rifle, weapons on across his chest, and they drive right past him. It tells you the orientation of some police departments and some police officers. So there's so many things we can talk about, case studies that are out and about, and it'll give elected people insight into how police chiefs think and how they pass those things on to their police officers.
Mayor, if I
Yeah,
could add.
I think that would be very helpful. And
Yeah.
George Chin has a question.
All right. Hey, George.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Butts. Actually, I don't have a question. I was actually there. I enjoyed it. I had my hands up from 2 presentations ago. I was I was just asking for a copy of the Redondo Beach Enhanced Pilot Program. But I didn't want to interrupt you guys, but I did enjoy the program.
Oh, I'm glad.
Are there any other questions for Jim?
Joe had his
Madam
hand up.
President, if I can, yeah, and thank you, Mayor Butts, for leading this discussion at these pivotal times here that our region, our state, and country is facing. I would just be mindful to colleagues that when we're talking about police reform, let's talk about reasonable reform moving forward. Now, I'm proud to be a part of a police agency that's the largest reform police agency in the country, based on its troubled past in LAPD, where how far we've come through a consent decree, which I felt has made this LAPD a more professional police agency. And a lot of these agencies across the country are 10 years behind what LAPD is today. It doesn't make it a perfect police agency. There's a core value is quality through continuous improvement. We're always striving to be a better professional police agency. And that's not to say that all other professions need tweaking and improvement. So I would say if we continue this dialogue, I would encourage Madam Chair and Jackie and staff to look at best practices in police agencies across our region, and look at reforms and training and hiring practices moving forward, just to name a few.
And Joe, you'll be happy to hear that one of the things that came up was the words defund and reimagine.
Yeah.
And the word I used was like bullshit, because you have to have plans in place when you talk about altering the resources for a critical function like public safety.
Thank you.
And don't throw around terms like reimagine, because it's an elected person or a politician's way of saying, I don't know what I'm doing.
Thank you.
I did make that point. However, one of my core pieces of emphasis is that you can neither legislate your way or rule your way out of the things that we see occurring over and over again, it starts with police culture and mentality, and how police officers are trained to see themselves in this public safety versus warrior versus service role. And
Right,
if
guardian mentality, right?
start out, yeah, exactly. You want to be a guardian, but the thing is, if you start out like we start out in the academy, being trained that everybody's going to kill you, and officer safety is said so much that people believe that officer safety is a real person, then that sets the tone that's passed on to generation after generation of police officer. And so for me, I've been in different police departments, run 3 different police departments, and run into the same problem each time I took over, because I was always an outsider. Even in the Inglewood Police Department, I was an outsider coming into the organization when I did. And so what I'm saying is deconstructing that warrior mentality, replacing it with a service-oriented guardian, realizing that 96, 97% of the things you do have nothing to do with violent crime. And so for me, that's my orientation. I wanted to share that I do agree with you with your premises, but the what's happening right now with electeds, they think they can legislate their way out of this, and they can't do that, because if they could, what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin would not happen. It's because they don't get it.
Yeah. Okay, well then I will work with our subcommittee on additional meetings if you'd like.
I think that would be great. I'm looking forward to doing that. Thank you again. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. It was an honor.
So let's move on. Is there anything else, Jackie, you wanted to talk about the pandemic update? You want to have
No,
a share?
that's for all of you. We have that as, I've left that on the agenda for anybody that wants to ask questions or share anything about how you're responding to the pandemic.
Is there anyone who would like to talk about what they're experiencing, the impact of their city, what they're doing, if they're doing something different, or are they, or there's something they want to share with us?
Okay, I do want to share this, you guys. On Facebook and on Twitter, it ran tonight. I did a podcast with Dr. Barbara Ferrer, the director of LA County Department of Public Health, and Snoop Dogg. It was 45 minutes on COVID-19 and a more down-to-earth, direct version of the virus and its impact on communities and society. And so it's on our website, www.cityofinglewood.org. And we also have a Twitter link that I can send to you, and it covers a lot of things. But anyway, it aired for the first time this evening at 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
So
anyone else want to share any stories about the pandemic or any the things that they're doing?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you. As Jackie alluded to, Mayor Garcetti signed executive order number, executive director rather, number 29, which called for a contactless and people-centered city initiative. And he moved to look at having residents, sorry, that's my little guy here. I think Apollo Dog International Day was yesterday, dude, okay? Sorry. What he moved forward on, all general managers shall ensure to the greatest extent practical is determined in the mayor's office, public-facing services that were paused or stopped due to COVID-19, identified in departments, made accessible online in contactless manner, payment of services, direct assistance services, public counter permit, library services, all done through electronically. And his directive is online for you to take a look at. He also created a task force in consultation with our ITA, in limiting public and staff potential exposure to COVID-19, improve operations and services by moving services online, ensure equity to residents, businesses, and visitors based on accessibility, availability, ensure cybersecurity and data protection standards are met, so on and so forth. So, and focusing direct assistance and payment services at our city sites. So that's most updated on the contactless and people-centered city initiative based on COVID-19.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anyone else? All right, then let's move on to agency reports. The Metro Service Council report by Don Zerlup, is he here?
No, these reports are the ones we don't, unless there's something somebody needs to say, we really don't report on them. The one thing I did learn is that Frank Zarunian from Rolling Hills Estates and Drew Boyles from El Segundo sit on something called the SCAG Emerging Technologies Committee, which I had no idea they existed. And so I've been asked to be added to the agenda, and they're talking about broadband and other kinds of things. So we will get more involved in that, hopefully, and get reports from hopefully Drew and Frank. I know Denny Shaw's here from the AQMD. I don't know if you have or Joe, do you have an AQMD report?
Yeah, if I can, Jackie and colleagues. September's meeting is, I'm looking forward to it. I chair the AQMD Technology Committee, and it focuses on advancing green technologies, and a couple items that's going to be before the entire board, AQMD board. We'll be using some of the Aliso Canyon settlement monies to install air filtration systems at 56 schools. Many of these schools are in the impacted area of the Aliso Canyon and freeway corridors. We're also pushing hard on incentive programs. Most of our incentives go towards mobile source programs. Just as a reminder, we have limited jurisdiction on mobile sources. Keep in mind, AQMD, we regulate stationary sources, but the mobile sources do account for 80% of the basin's emissions. And lastly, we're working with shippers to identify a ship that frequents our port and upgrade the emission systems to take it to from a 2-tier to a 4-tier. Ships are of course challenging, but we want to show that it is possible to convert them. There's talk that by 2023, ships will be one of the largest pollution emitters in our region. And I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but the ARB, the Air Resources Board, today just approved one of the forward-thinking focus on doing what they can on focusing on trucks and ship-going vessels. The news just broke within the last hour. I don't have details on that, but you can easily look it up. I think a Times article just came out on it. It's probably one of the most forward-thinking regulations on trucks and ships that we've seen since automobiles have been regulated to improve our air emissions in our state. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other oral reports that are being submitted to clarify something that was written, some of the written reports?
I just wanted to say, I just noticed that WRCOG, which is another sub-regional agency, had a meeting this morning on the Brown Act, actually, and possibly discussing ways of changing the Brown Act. Because as you know, we'll be able to have this meeting because the governor has suspended portions of the Brown Act. So CalCOG, which we belong to, the California Council of Governments, is going to be working with the League of California Cities to come up with possible Brown Act amendments that would allow hybrid meetings. And I contacted them and asked them to please keep us informed, because I think it's something we've talked about here. And if there's any way we can support that effort, we'd like to do that, I think.
Absolutely. All right. Are there any announcements about upcoming events or anything that's going on in your cities that you want to share with us? If not, I'm going
if I can, I'm sorry. I just hate to take up the time, but I'm really impressed.
Please do.
Our South Bay cities. I know Cosmont mentioned this. I'm really proud of each and every one of us who are helping our local establishments, our businesses with the outdoor dining programs. I'm seeing it in Manhattan Beach and in Redondo Beach, El Segundo, and Hermosa Beach. I'm really proud of what we've done in the downtown San Pedro area with our dining platforms. It's really helping out our restaurants. So kudos to, and of course, we encourage you to come visit downtown San Pedro and our dining platforms. We have some great restaurants, but I'm just really proud of us in helping our small businesses and our restaurants that have taken a significant hit. I've seen it. I love the artwork on the K-rails. I believe that's in Redondo Beach. On the platform dining is really taking a hit, and not taking a hit, but it's a winner.
Yes, thank you. I agree. We're seeing this all over the county, and I want to say that Hawthorne has joined in. We passed a resolution. We allow outdoor dining on the sidewalks, in the parking lots. We've got very creative new designs for setting up restaurants all over Hawthorne, and I'm seeing it in other cities as well. So yes, everybody's trying to do their part. Thank you, Joe. Does anyone else want to weigh in? If not, I'm going to adjourn the meeting until Thursday, September 24th, 2020 at 6 p.m. I'm going to ask all of you to stay safe, be well, and enjoy the activities that you can in your cities. The summer is almost over, but we can still have fun, but just be safe. Wear your masks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Night.
you.